All right. Miguna has been making headlines all through the week for various reasons. And of course, the latest was his re-deportation. We're seeing people, we've had claims of, people saying, yesterday the lawyer was here and she said that he was sedated and taken to Dubai unconsciously. As a human, what do you think about this?
Thank you, Ashley. To start with, I think this issue of Miguna was, and the drama that has followed was totally unnecessary. And I'm sure neither Miguna nor the government actually anticipated that this issue would escalate to the level that we have seen and actually end up dominating news.
Yeah.
I think it was a very simple issue that the court had ordered. Miguna comes back. But then there were still some pending questions that arose, of course, when he arrived. What document did he use to travel? And therefore, if it is not a Kenyan passport, there may be need to apply,
Yes.
for a visa or that. And then, of course, things ended up escalating. In my opinion, it was totally unnecessary, but other questions now have come up in terms of Miguna's personal rights and also his obligations, but also now the role of the state and, of course, the stand-up with the other arms of government, like the judiciary. But I think it would have been a very simple thing if he had produced the document that was required. Now, there are other issues, of course, that have come up in terms of how this matter has been handled, but like I have said, it was totally unnecessary. In a sense, I can say he was the author of his own troubles if he had actually just produced that particular document. But I think from the question you asked in terms of how he has been treated and the way, the drama we have seen on TV, that was totally unnecessary. And the only thing I can tell you, when the dust settles somewhere in the distant future, we'll pay heavily for that. We'll have to compensate Miguna.
We will. Do you think we'll have to compensate him?
It may be some necessary cause of recourse for that to be pursued, especially through human rights lenses and pursuit of natural justice. There is lots of duality in this whole matter. There is the political implication, there is the legal implication to all this. And when you talk about the human rights lenses through which we need to look at this issue, one wonders why, for example, minimally, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights has simply made a statement and not done much that its mandate necessitates. For example, when you look at Section 7, Part D of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Act of 2011, it stipulates clearly that it is supposed to be a defender and an observer of all natural justice. The other thing is that when you look at Section 27 of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Act, it bestows powers of a court on the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. It can issue summonses, it can subpoena anyone, it can do a thorough investigation. It would be proper for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to thoroughly investigate this matter and give a report before, instead of just, say, doing an important press statement. The other thing is this, that other legal issues arise. Questions, yes, of the violation of court orders, etc. But the critical thing here is, beyond the citizenship issue that arises, which of course we know very well that it cannot be revoked by any person whatsoever, was he treated fairly? The answer is no. Did also Miguna act brazenly as was anticipated of him? The answer is yes. Now, all sides have got some apportionment of blame that they must shoulder. Miguna, knowing very well that he's a traveler, should have handed in his documents to the immigration officers or officials, which is general practice. Even when you are traveling locally, you have to identify yourself at the port of entry or exit whatsoever. The other thing is that if at all there were issues to do with his nature of travel, or whether it's a question of I doubt his political inclination was at issue, but if at all it's at issue, then I think it is taking this matter too far. Legally speaking, I think it was an affront to the rule of natural justice and law to the person of Miguna Miguna. And so in the end, we know very well, by way of how the courts have determined themselves on matters of Nyayo torture, house issues, etc., those who were brutalized by the British have been compensated. Such determinations have been done by the courts. If Miguna seeks to go before the courts on these matters anytime in future, then the courts may adjudicate this matter and may grant him relief.
All right. Yes.
I think it's important to also perhaps understand why Miguna acted the way he did, and also why the government acted the way, or the state acted the way it did. For Miguna, the issue at stake here is if he had produced his Canadian passport, and you remember what was at stake was a question about his citizenship. Of course, it would have validated what the government had been saying, during the initial deportation. So, and that is why he was hesitant and kept waving his Kenyan ID to say, I'm a Kenyan. But you see also on the other hand, for the government, initially, of course, the idea was for him to produce the Canadian, passport, which would have required him to acquire a temporary visa, and it of course have restricted what you do within the country. But the other thing is when the first attempt to deport him failed, the government actually almost swallowed the humble pie and actually provided the documents that would help him regularize his status. Because again, on the other hand, the government did not want to concede. So these two people knew that these two entities knew there was actually something at stake. And eventually, and the issue is, I admire Miguna for his resilience, but when you have a competition with government, the government can be quite resilient. And I think we saw the determination leading to actually his second deportation.
All right.
But the questions still arise about his status as a citizen, which we have said cannot be taken away.
All right. And this is still the same story that is making headlines. You can see in the Daily Nation, Miguna escorted by elite GSU to Dubai, the standard hidden price of exiling Miguna, and of course, even star why Miguna was deported a second time, which of course can make one wonder. This is only one person. Is there something we could be missing? Why is the government giving so much effort into this, Javas?
Well, whether it's one person, it matters. Because when you look at the Declaration, Universal Declaration on Human Rights, it says each person, the term each connotes that any person that is a human being, such person's rights must be observed, preserved, and protected.
But how many cases like this that have been
there are far too many, of course.
Yes.
But we know very well the entire political fiasco that has surrounded this whole matter, starting 30th January with the issue of the swearing in of Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga.
Yes.
And also knowing very well that Miguna Miguna is a political whirlwind. And knowing very well that he can rarely restrain himself from speaking with such verbosity, angst, and bravado, you know very well that he easily courts attention from each side. But generally, even looking at the headlines, we know very well that there is so much cost to pay for this. Cost to pay on the part of Miguna. Miguna already is paying for it. Cost to pay on the part of the government of Kenya. Remember already that the international community is watching these whole issues as they turn out. Appreciate too that when key institutions, say whether it is the World Bank, etc., or the Bretton Woods institutions, when they are rating the ease of doing business in a nation, they are considering, or they always consider, matters to do with the observation of the rule of law, matters to do with political stability, etc. Remember that we have had political turbulence since the election time.
Yes.
And things have just started cooling down. But with all these issues arising, then the international spotlight is on Kenya yet again. On the question of human rights. And that matter is very significant. The United Nations also may want to weigh in on this, possibly at some point, if it escalates. But given the anticipated guidance and leadership on the part of government, yes, President Kenyatta, etc., it would be important for them to see to it that this matter actually comes to rest.
All right.
But before they even do that, it would be necessary for us to appreciate from the leadership of the president and the Jubilee administration what is their view, their position, which actually cannot be compromised, on the regard for the rule of law and the Constitution of Kenya.
All right, I want us to look at this headline, hidden price of exiling Miguna. Do you think there's a hidden price? I mean, all this maybe could be leading to the 2022 elections.
Okay, maybe I want to look at it from different angles.
Yes.
You can tell, of course, the issue has escalated. It's almost beyond Miguna now. And the question of politics, of course, is involved. Because when you see the statements he's been issuing from Dubai or whatever location he is currently, he still signs off as the leader of NRM and still refers to despots and the legitimate government. Where, of course, we were at a point where we were almost now starting to enjoy some kind of political tranquility. And all of a sudden, of course, Miguna comes in and there are questions about, do you undo the handshake and are the issues that were there prior to this of course, still there. Yeah. But I think one of the issues that I look at, and it is important to understand, of course, an airport being an important installation, and there are the conventions that govern, of course, that kind of behavior. I have said it would have been highly irregular, of course, if he had been just allowed to enter the country just on the basis of the idea. And that is why I'm saying this drama was unnecessary. But I think looking at it, the issues have escalated because you saw something, and I think it is important to focus on this, the tension between the executive and the judiciary, because that is what it became.
Yes.
Because quickly the lawyers, for Miguna, and I hope they were giving him the right advice, throughout, because I think that was a question has come up whether they were giving him the right advice or he was defying the advice they gave him. When they went to court and got these orders, and all of a sudden now we actually see the judge, summoning the IG and the CS Interior and the Director of Immigration. There is something there, of course, because you can see around the issue of Miguna, court orders have been issued and defied, and you can tell this was almost a tension between the executive and the judiciary in terms of who will bow first. And we saw, of course, it was almost an anticlimax. When yesterday, the only fine that was issued was 200,000. Yeah. But you remember, this is a tension that has been brewing for some time, and that is why, again, the government appeared so determined to defy actually these directives that had been issued, because it would almost lead the judiciary to submission. So there is another war that is coming. But in terms of the cost of this, in the future when Miguna sues for two things: one, illegal detention, because there were previous court orders that were issued before he was deported the first time, and he was held in different facilities against, of course, contrary to the orders that had been issued. He will have a case. When again he talks about illegal deportation, because this time he was coming back twice, was because the courts had ordered that the initial deportation was illegal. So when he will eventually sue for illegal detention and deportation, we may have to pay him a lot of money.
But then, before we get to even the judicial and all that, the handshake was questioned during this period. I mean, we saw Raila Odinga at the airport, and we expected, now that Raila is here, it will be easy, a transition. Miguna will be just let free. But that wasn't the case, which also questions, were we duped as Kenyans? What is this handshake entail?
One wonders whether Miguna's theatrics and all this noise was an effort to try and shake the power of the handshake. And we know very well that it may not have borne any fruits. Though upon that Harambee House compromise, which has now been termed as the handshake, Miguna has hurled serious epithets against the president and Honorable Raila Odinga, and condemned even that compromise itself. And he has continually called them despots. And now one wonders, when he terms or calls or refers to despots, is it inclusive also of ODM? Because now they are family trying to work together. We have seen the leader of majority in the National Assembly, the leader of minority, John Badi, indicating that they will even support Jubilee's Big Four agenda, etc. So they are working together. So when he says despots, does it also refer to the entire team, which is inclusive of ODM and Jubilee? Now, the other thing is that this Harambee House compromise, it was highly expected or hoped by many that would resolve lots of other issues, especially those that were bedeviling ODM or the opposition, NASA. It has not seemed so, because by way of the appearance of Honorable Odinga at the airport, it was highly imagined and hoped that his presence there would quell things, and that because of the handshake, then the president and the government would go slow on how they would want to handle Miguna. But that's not been the case. Now, I think the question of the handshake should not make us lose reason and sense of direction on actually what needs to be reasonably done.
Okay. And what needs to be reasonably
if
done?
it's a question of addressing issues of electoral justice, let them be reasonably done and handled thoroughly and satisfactorily. If it's a question of handling issues to do with observance of the rule of law or question of immigration rules, etc., let it be done according to reason and the laws that are there.
Yes.
If it's a question of also obeying court orders, which is actually subject to the rule of law, then such should be done by the dictates of reason. Unfortunately, even going by the ruling or by the judgment of the court yesterday, the rule of law has been actually spat on. It is actually a serious affront on the Constitution by government officials. And to me, assailing the rule of law amounts to trying to actually assail and disregard the entire judiciary.
All right. Before I want us to come to the matter of the judiciary, the court and everything. And of course, yesterday, the court fined Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i and Immigration Principal Secretary Gordon Kalangwa and Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet with 200,000 shillings. This story is also on Standard page 4. And the question they're asking is it the end of the road for Matiang'i? Because judge says any citizen can now seek removal of CS Boynet and Kihalangwa after finding them unfit to hold office.
Well, it's not the end of the road. I would say it's almost an academic thing to say because and there was a story that I think you ran earlier where there were certain orders that were given against Nkaiseri, the late Nkaiseri and Kibicho, and they were defied, and those people still continued holding office. But it is unfortunate, of course, in terms of what you're saying. Remember when I spoke about the tension between the executive and the judiciary, you have had accusations leveled against the judiciary in terms of what they are calling judicial activism, where they feel that the judges occasionally go beyond their mandate to actually write their views into the laws or into the judgment. And I think has been one of the sticking points. It is unfortunate because, and correctly we identify, when there is a violation of the court orders that have been issued, definitely is encouraging because what should protect us and make us all equal under the law, it is actually the Constitution. And I will keep saying that the one thing that protects the weak and the powerless and the marginalized in this country is actually the Constitution. So I must find fair treatment in the law and in the Constitution. But when you see that this defiance, of course, it's a bad sign looking at it. Of course, and I would want to fault the court actually in one sense. Instead of just taking a legalistic approach to this particular issue, they would also have taken a mediation approach, trying to actually understand, because when you now issue orders, number one, that are hard to implement, and Justice Odunga actually said that even if I order for the arrest, there will be nobody to implement this. It is actually almost hardening positions. A mediation approach, which is still acceptable within the Constitution, would have tried to bring the parties together and find a solution out of it. So just issuing the orders, of course, may have escalated the matter that we have seen. Allow me to go back to the question of politics.
Yes.
There are also some people, I believe, within ODM who are becoming uncomfortable with the presence of Miguna or the way he was actually rising, and perhaps their secretary rejoicing. And that is why you also see, and Miguna appeared also a bit disappointed that the response and people coming out, even if yesterday we saw a group of MPs coming out to defend him, some of them are actually happy he's not there because he was almost upstaging them.
Yeah, which of course now brings the issue of 2022 and ODM, the cracks between NASA. What next?
Well, I think it is to overrate Miguna if we say that this whole matter is going to have a serious bearing on the 2022 elections. I mean, really.
I agree.
Yes. Why overrate the man beyond actually his weight? Politically speaking, on national politics, Miguna is paperweight. And all this noise about what he's trying to do politically is just a paper tiger.
Yeah.
So it may not amount to much in terms of having a bearing on how the 2022 battle formations are going to shape up. Nothing, nada, nothing completely. And he can take that to whatever bank in Canada he'll be, whatever bank he can carry.
You're getting past.
No, that's just a hard fact. But if it's a question of him gaining political mileage personally, then we can say that he has done a great job at branding, actually rebranding, repositioning himself, and trying to show that actually he is a latter-day vanguard of, the new frontiers of politics and struggle for constitutional, issues and identities. So to that extent, Miguna is actually kind of a genius. When whatever's been circulating on social media, on the internet, etc., about his phone calls in Dubai, he's telling somebody on phone, I want the whole world to know. Please let the whole world know. So basically, he's just shouting from the rooftops for purposes of gaining various political mileage. And it's true also, as Doc has said, that on his part, he wants to milk dry from this whole process, even if it will take milking a stone, so that he can gain whatever he can, political mileage, for himself. Remember that he contested for the gubernatorial seat in Nairobi. Who knows what he may want to contest for in 2022, if, yes, permitting that God grants him life and that also he will be, in the country. So from that front, then right now he has really gained politically as a person. But beyond that, I think it is to give him accolades that are not due to him.
All right. But then, the question that most citizens have been asking is, one, if Miguna can, this can happen to him, what about a mere Kenyan like me? Who knows?
As a matter of fact and conscientiously looking at this matter, the violation of any person's rights, as it was articulated by J.F. Kennedy, is a threat to the rights of every other citizen and all the other rights whatsoever. Remember that the rights that have been violated are rights that are domiciled in the Constitution of Kenya. When the rule of law is violated, it is a critical part of the Constitution of Kenya under Article 10. When we see public servants not respecting the rule of law, they violate Article 232 of the Constitution. All right? So when all these issues are happening, you realize that it is various state officers who are openly scoffing at the Constitution. To become an open scoffer at the Constitution when you're a public officer itself actually beats the logic about the Constitution that you yourself swore to defend and protect.
On the issue of the rule of law, and in terms of rights, I like looking at rights in terms of Miguna's personal rights, but also the obligations. Yes, we agree his rights have been violated. If it is true that he was dragged, as he said, which was totally unnecessary. But like I said, remember that there are your personal rights, but there is also in the processes that would have been. And remember what I said, Miguna would have walked out of JKIA at any point if he had produced his Canadian passport. And that is why I'm saying he had the path of least resistance available to him. He took the path of the hardest resistance, and that is why we have seen all these things evolving. So it is important, and I also want to condemn in the strongest terms possible, like you said, that his personal rights may have been violated. But on the other hand, I think it is also important to appreciate that he could have ordered his own travel by simply refusing to produce the travel document that he knew he used in the other stations, which he actually produces comfortably in the airport, except when he gets to JKIA.
So there was something he was trying to do.
Absolutely.
All right, we want to take a short break, but of course when we come back, we have more discussions going on. Don't go too far.